to chapter 8. Oh, come here, little buddy. Little buddy. Little friend. Alright. I don't know how I'm feeling. Just know I've been putting this off, but I gotta catch us up. Gotta get through a lot of books this year. Hopefully. Okay. You're Craig. Todd drew back a step, his nose wrinkling like someone who had just discovered crawling things in his oatmeal. Annabelle stared past him at old Pa, too stunned herself to take offense. She and Julia Craig were blood relatives? It wasn't by chance, then, or mere whim, that she'd been singled out for Julia Craig's attentions. There must be a tie between them, like a radar beam would betray every dart and dodge Annabelle made to escape. This girl is Annabelle's grandma? Donna asked. She held the picture now, examining it. Julia Craig only raised her. She wasn't her child, Annabelle said in a last-ditch attempt to deny any connection. My grandmother was an orphan. An orphan? Yes, from the time she was a little thing, old Pa said musingly, as if the doors to his memory were gradually widening. Typhoid or some such took off Julia's brother and his wife, seems like. I know Julia did a fair piece of traveling to fetch her. You could almost be twins, Donna marveled, raising her eyes to appraise Annabelle. The way your eyebrows curve, and the shape of your mouth, and the same long chin and straight nose. Curiosity overcame Annabelle's dismay. She had been too unsettled by her first glance at the girl in the picture to note any details. Well, let's see. I've never had a picture of my grandmother. Her thumb slid to cover the older face as she took the photograph. It would be a long time, if ever, before she would glimpse that too benign smile again, without seeing it broaden into a skull's naked grin. The girl's face was partly in profile, bent above the cat in her arms. Annabelle had the uncanny sensation of staring into a mirror at a self that was and was not hers. Unlike the grab bag effect of uncoordinated features which she was used to confronting in the glass, there was a pleasing harmony to the pictured face, framed in its soft page-boy bob, as if the parts had been designated to go together. The other Annabelle, Annie, had been molded on a smaller scale, perhaps. It was difficult to tell her height from the picture, which showed her only from the waist up, but Annabelle doubted that her grandmother lived with the dread of one day finding herself over 6 feet tall. She's not much older here than you either, Donna observed, still comparing. Annabelle nodded. She could be 17 at most. They eloped as soon as she turned 18, Aunt Lil told me. My plans to escape at hand on her shoulder that hand on her shoulder have been simmering in the back of Anne's mind, even as the camera shutter had clicked. Her expression gave no clue. She smiled down at the cat, as if for that moment she was involved with nothing else. Annabelle knew well enough how that was. Hatted Muffin's purr against her cheek often spun her a private world that was wholly invulnerable. For a little space. They say Julia burned everything the girl left behind. Old Pa tore off a piece of paper. Wow, I am not here today. I'm a bad reader today. I think I'm distracted. I don't want to keep people waiting. Okay. They say Julia burned everything the girl left behind. Old Pa tore off a piece of paper toweling and began polishing his glasses. Never spoke the girl's name again, and wouldn't ever let it be spoken. Just went straight through the house and got rid of every reminder. Michael checked a yawn midway. Hey, I bet that was her room. The girl's. We saw at the cottage. That empty room next to the kitchen. Julia was the one that had to own things, and what she owned she didn't share. It had to be all hers, or she didn't want any. Old Pa breathed on his lenses and rubbed harder. Todd expelled a gusty laugh. Even Craigs can't stand Craigs. Old Peterson, it's Peterson she blamed for everything. Him and his. Old Pa settled the glasses carefully over his ears. The last thing she was about to take them to court over her claim that he was cut. The last thing she was about to take him to court over her claim for the take him to court over her claim that he was cutting timber with a long-handled axe, harvesting trees from her side of the property line. And she disappeared forever, Todd raised. Clasped his hands above his head in the champion's salute. Let's hear for great grandpa. Hush, not so much noise. Donna pointed a warning finger toward the ceiling. Old Pa folded himself into Annabelle's step stool. Peterson, he gave as good as he got. He was stubborn as they come, but he had a temper you wouldn't want to fool with. He shook his head, remembering. I was there the day she lit into him at the post office for poisoning her cat. He blew up and told her where she could go and take her cat and her temper and her girl with her. Told her so loud half the town heard. He paused to clear his throat. Well, that's the last day anybody ever saw her. Annabelle thrust the picture back in the pocket of her robe to keep from stealing another look at Julia Craig. Was that before or after my grandmother died? She was beginning to understand why her grandmother had gambled on finding a better life somewhere else, and why her grandfather was not fond of visiting his old home. Old Pa scratched his jaw. As I recall it, they was still beating the woods for Julia the day of that girl's funeral. Must be Julia was gone first. It made quite a stir, the two things coming so close together like they did. Think of that, Todd said, pretending innocent wonder. Could it be Clarabelle's grandpa got his belly full of the Craigs the same time great-grandpa did, and they each scragged them one? Annabelle's hand was in motion before she was aware of where it was going. It flattened against Todd's greasy mouth with the smack that resounded in the kitchen. His expressions changed from disbelief to outrage, his color from paste to purpling red. His mouth opened, shut, and opened, but only sound was a gasping wheeze as he strained for breath. He shook a fist at her helplessly, his hand rising to claw at his throat. For a minute, no one else moved or spoke. Then Donna gave Michael a push. Go find his inhaler, upstairs, in his room, probably. Hey. Michael sprinted out the door a split second before Uncle Axel, still buttoning his shirt, strode in. What's all this racket? Why are you kids up at this hour? Aunt Lil crowded past him. "Todd! Oh my goodness!" Todd was bent double by now, his hands gripping a chair back in his struggle to drag air into his lungs. Michael returned with the inhaler and launched into a garbled account of sleepwalking, howling dogs, and how he printed up those pictures before Grandpa had pronounced the Craig Cottage and its contents off limits. Donna was already pouring out her tale of fumblings in the night, nightmares, and practical jokes that weren't funny. Aunt Lil clucked and cooed over Todd. Uncle Axel paced here and there, asking questions and frowning at the answers. Annabelle withdrew to the further side of the refrigerator. There she stood, looking on as if she were viewing a television show. She felt empty, and miles removed from the turmoil around her. Todd's gasps became sputters of accusation against her. She watched the rosy swelling on his upper lip grow more obvious as the rest of his color faded to normal, and the effort to defend herself didn't seem worth the bother. "Did you hear me, Annabelle?" She woke to the fact that Uncle Axel was in front of her, his hand out. "I asked if you have that picture. I want to see it." She yielded it up with a flicker of misgiving. "It's the only picture I've ever had of my grandmother." He was rigid, staring at it. Aunt Lil deserted Todd to come over to Uncle Axel's shoulder. "Julia, Craig, and Annie, sure enough. I didn't really believe it. Why, I never realized." She glanced from the photograph to Annabelle and back, her voice trailing off. Uncle Axel muttered something short and harsh. His fists closed on the photograph, crushing it. "No, don't!" Annabelle grabbed for his sleeve in a useless attempt to save the picture. He stepped out of her reach and tore the oblong paper in half, and tore the fragments across twice more. "I'm sorry." He flung the scraps into the garbage pail under the sink. "But I'm not going to have that old business be raked up again. Just forget it. Michael, if you have any more of those printed, I want them too, and the negatives." Todd blew his nose loudly. "They're on the barn. He's got a whole bunch of stuff in a big plastic envelope hid behind his bench." Michael turned a bewildered glare on him. "That's my business. You said if I showed you, you'd never tell. You promised." "I want to see them," Uncle Axel repeated grimly. "Go get some clothes on, and then show me." Head down, Michael shrunk from the kitchen at a far different pace from his dash to fetch Todd's inhaler. Todd lolled back in his chair and blew his nose again. "Think," Donna said distinctly. She twitched her robe tighter about her as to not brush him as she passed. "I'm going up and get dressed too." Annabelle would have followed her, but Aunt Lil laid a hand on her arm to stop her. "It's nothing against your grandmother, honey. Maybe if she lived longer, but sometimes it's best not to have reminders lying around of a bad time that's over and done with." Annabelle said nothing. She couldn't trust herself to speak. Aunt Lil patted her arm and drew her toward Todd. "Now I want you two to apologize to each other and shake hands. You're family, and you'll be glad of it someday." Uncle Paul's rusty quaver interrupted from his stool. "It's not done with. Never was. She's waiting there, watching her chance. And see means mischief. But you won't see it. You won't listen till it's too late." It was true. None of them did listen. None but Annabelle. Only the tightened line of Uncle Axel's jaw as he swung to glower out the window hinted that he even heard. Aunt Lil tugged Annabelle forward and seized Todd's. So dry. Seized Todd's arm so briskly she actually jerked him. "Now say you're sorry and shake hands on it," she commanded. "But oh, I'm so sorry. That should almost be like a feature, not a bug." I'm losing so much time on this project. Ugh, too slow. A little slow. Todd's moist fingers touched Annabelle's and curled away. "She's the one that should be sorry." "I am sorry," Annabelle said. More than that, she was furious. Ice cold, but seething. In less than a week she had been scolded, humiliated, terrified, treated like a mental case, and deliberately misled, if not lied to outright. All because of a stupid secret that should have been her right to know from the very start. She shook off Aunt Lil's hand. "I'm sorry I ever came here. I'm sorry I ever heard of this family, and I'm sorry my dad didn't change our name to Smith and let the Petersons go jump." She was backing toward the stairs, but she fired one more shot from the door. "At least the Craigs never murdered anybody." Uncle Axel pivoted from the window as if he'd been yanked by a string. "No Peterson has ever committed murder either. Understand that, and don't you forget it." His eyes, chill blue behind his spectacles, stabbed at her across the room, but she was beyond flinching. She raised her head higher. He was, after all, not quite as tall as she by an inch and a half. "Why should I believe that? You don't. You're the one who's scared purple. It's true. It isn't true." A stifled snicker drew her attention to Todd. He was sitting erect, grinning wildly in anticipation of the disaster she was calling upon herself. "And you," she pointed at him. "So sorry you got asthma. What would you do with no asthma to save you every time you chicken out?" Wow, it was a low blow, so low it felt inspired. "Mischief," she heard old Pa repeating as she fled into the hall and up the stairs. There were other voices in the upstairs hall. The door of Michael's room was open, and Donna, still in robe and slippers, stood just inside, her back to the hall. "So dumb," she was saying. "Plain stupid dumb. You know he'll rat. He always does. But you go right on telling him everything you know. You never learn." Michael's retort was gruff from what might have been withheld tears. "And you have to put on such a big act always, like you're so cool, like nobody in the world knows anything but you." Neither of them saw Annabelle, and she didn't linger. Donna and Michael fighting. She never heard them quarrel before, and both of them were now at odds with group leader Todd. Could it be that Julia Craig was reaching out to touch them all? Mischief, mischief. The warning creaked from the steps as she ran up the remaining stairs. And by mischief, old Paul didn't mean kiddie pranks like sneaking cookies. He meant it in the old-time sense of doing willful harm. Annabelle dropped onto her ruffled bed and stared at her clenched hands. Was it possible that she had just slapped Todd and insulted Uncle Axel and defied Aunt Lil? Surely someone would be coming after her soon to call her to account. Well, let them. A punch of her fist sent her pillow skidding across the bed. What could they do worse than send her home where she wanted to be? Let her mother start being a parent again, instead of a middle-aged schoolgirl indulging in a toothbrush. No. The objection broke so sharply into her thoughts that she turned, half convinced that someone must have spoken it out loud. The room, its shadows vanished by daylight, was empty of anyone beyond her. But maybe she was really beginning to lose her mind. Without intending to, she led her eyes straight to the dresser she and Donna had struggled last night to close. They had done a sloppy job of it, she saw. On the one end it was jammed in tightly on an upward slant, and at the other it was tilted outward, leaving a gap wide enough for a hand to slip through. Her shoe. Her heart began an uneven beat, but she made herself walk over, kneel down, and reach inside. The black sneakers were there, exactly where they were supposed to be. Their coolness was clammy to her fingers, but she couldn't swear that they were actually damp. No more than she could swear that the sandy grit trapped in the rubber ridges of the sole had not been there last night. And if she could swear it, was what of it? There would be some logical explanation that almost fit, as there was for everything else. She could march up to Uncle Axel with the ghost cat in her arms, misty and transparent, and he would somehow prove that it was no ghost at all, and immediately proceed to kill it. She sprang up, her angry grief at the loss of the photograph boiling over afresh. And what other treasures would now have meaning? What other treasures that would now have meaning for her might there be in the Craig cottage? By rights they should be hers as Julia Craig's only living descendant. The cottage, too. What made Uncle Axel think he could lock and nail her out if... What? She pressed her hands on the desktop, dizzied by the crazy path her mind was taking. Visit that cottage. Wild horses couldn't drag her there if it contained all the wealth of the Indies, whatever that might be. It was as if, for a moment, other than hers, another will than hers had been in possession of her thoughts. She picked up her hairbrush and launched an attack on the snarls in her hair. The brush snagged on a tangle and twisted in her hand. Her impatient tug to free it brought tears to her eyes. It also flipped a lock of hair across her forehead, giving the effect of bangs. When her vision cleared, her lean, too long face had vanished from the mirror. The face that stared wonderingly out at her, nicely contoured and proportioned, was Annie Craig's. Annabelle was slow to understand, but when she did, a wonderful delight filled her. To destroy a black and white photograph was one thing. Dealing with an image in living color would be quite another. What are you doing? Donna asked from behind her without much interest. Annabelle resumed her brushing. Thinking of cutting my hair. Hey, super! Donna's enthusiasm picked up a trifle. Only have a professional do it. I know a neat shop in town where they don't charge too much. Okay, why not? I've got some mad money my mother gave me. Mad was the right word, too, Annabelle reflected, and the result would be worth the expense. Anybody in the bathroom, or can I go clean up? The delicate aura of after-bath lotion and scented shampoo that trailed Donna through the room testified that she already had her turn. Nobody, she said, hanging up her robe. Grandpa just told Michael off to the barn. Todd's gone back to bed, and Grandma's still in the kitchen. She unfolded a melon-colored top, considered it, and laid it aside in favor of a navy blue before she added, Grandma and Grandpa had a big fight a few minutes ago. I heard them through the bathroom register. What about? Well, Pa, mostly, I guess. Like what to do with him, and what he says, and like that. Donna turned Sorry. Donna returned the navy blue to the dresser and distinctly took up the Donna returned the navy blue to the dresser and distractedly took up the melon again. I don't remember that they had ever had a fight before. Annabelle fished her slippers from under the bed and put them on. Mischief, mischief. The compass lay on the bed, its hiding place exposed by the pillows she had knocked aside. She tucked it in her pocket lest Todd's recuperate. All right. She tucked it in her pocket lest Todd recuperate and start prowling sooner than expected. Besides, the weight of the brass case was rather like an anchor to reality. Until she woke to what was running in her mind, that was little more practice. Until she woke what was running in her mind, that a little more practice with it, and she would need have no fear of getting lost on a return visit to the cottage.